So my journey into beauty began at NID once when a friend showed me six logos and asked me which is the best. And I had done engineering and then joined NID. And to my insensitive eyes, I couldn't find any difference. All the six looked the same. But I understood that there is something that I'm missing. So actually, my journey at NID was to reclaim the senses, to see. So I remember our photography course was just 2 weeks. But I took that whole semester, every day, going out, seeing, shooting. So, so that is the journey that I began to see. And luckily, I was a very bad student in the school. So I was able to hold questions. A good student is somebody who can conclude very fast. All right answers are in their head, no doubt. So luckily for me, what is beauty was held. I didn't look for answers in the books or with anybody. I just started observing. And then, of course, I started working with rural tribal communities. And it was also very clear that through modern educational process, a complete recolonization is taking place. Much more deeper and much more, uh, uh, you know, it takes you completely away from your own being. And through the guise of education, progress. All that is the term given to this. But it's a basic destruction of what is to be being. So I began to work with rural tribal people at that time because I realized that if you want to understand colonization, you have to be with people who are not colonized, educationally colonized. So I began to live with illiterate people and I began to work with them. And in the process, I also realized that I'm there to actually not teach at all, but to learn because this NGO framework, no, to not save them, but save us. So it became very clear to me that I should work with them in such a way uh, that they are not disturbed by our intervention, but we learn from them. So I started seeing absolute originality in the work that women or men did from the rural tribal belt. And I call this do nothing training methods, absolutely no teaching at all. So I began to see originality happening from people who have no exposure to so-called art because they wouldn't even know what art is. And consistently this started happening in wherever I have worked. I was able to see this happening. Then I began to work with children from rural areas. Again, the same method. No teaching, just give them materials and let things happen. And again, magic began to happen. I don't think from any school you will find such work. This is 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old children from rural belt. Never seen a book on art. Now trained on this nonsense that children are meant to do now, no? Doing this and doing that and all kinds of silliness that we inculcate in them. Now, from things, materials around, so didn't even require money actually. Old magazines, and absolutely beauty emerges. No effort. So in the process, I realized that. So initially, I was more into a political activity in the sense of trying to understand what is decolonization. But as I started living with rural tribal people, I realized that I should move into biology. It's not decolonization that is required, but to recover something that is biologically ingrained in us, which get disturbed. So, so this was a very, very sorry. Mm, I remember. So this incident that I saw was that a potter girl from a slab of clay, she started scooping out circular plates. no effort. I remembered my days at NID where 6 months, I think we were training every day, learning to draw circles, lines, of course, straight line, circles, every day training to do that. I was wondering where did this girl go to get trained. So naturally this was happening. You saw that happening in that the way that girl was also making. Yeah. So I began to see there's an urge for order innate in us. You know? A simple example is something like when you see something, you know, tilted, immediately you want to put it back. Am I right? Don't you do that with the mats? As you enter, the mat is slightly turned. Immediately you would do it, no? And this is something that is innate in us. This is what I found, that we are missing some things like this because we are not watching these simple things that we do spontaneously. Children, of course. So I happened to run a school for some time, and I saw this interesting thing this girl was doing. You must take a look at that. How spontaneously she started organizing this. Wants to also join. Other interesting thing was that there were about 6, 7 children working on the same thing. No teacher, no leader. Everyone was doing their thing, but there was no one leading them. See, these are actually human principles that are completely lost in the modernity's framework. They only understand reason. Beyond that, they don't understand anything. They say that animals, birds have what they call this intelligence of the collective. That's why they are able to fly together. I'm telling that we are also exactly like that. And I find this thing happening in the rural tribal areas when children work together, not urban children, because we damage them right from the time they are out. I'm talking about rural children who have not been schooled, whose parents have not been schooled. Then you see this magic happening. They use intuition, they use completely something else that the modern rational linguistic minds have no access to. So, so I began to feel that actually when you say something is composed, when you see something beautiful, to me, I think it means that the load on the eye, the cognitive load is the least. Which means actually all this has to do with a certain kind of refinement, which is already innate. Then I also began to document many, many things that I see in the rural areas. Oh, the volume doesn't work. All right. But you can imagine that, no? That man you can see the movement at least. Here, of course, the movement you can see. So this is there everywhere. Every action has rhythm. See this. When two people are coming together, no one is guiding, but there is a fantastic way in which they synchronize and do this. പിന്നെ ഞാൻ പഠിച്ചത് ഡിസൈനിങ് ആണ്. That one act he does. And this you see also in modern spaces where the body is old. So they still repeat the same rhythm in every activity that they do. So this is nothing to do with habit. It is the way the body responds to things. So I will also take you through a simple activities that I was doing with design students. So I actually looked at how do we address this in modernity. That has been my interest. So when I began to work with design students, I was already meeting students who are cognitively damaged, whose senses are dysfunctional, who have theories in their head but don't see, So I began a very, very different approach to this. The whole focus was on observation. Observe, observe, observe. So whatever work you do, let it enhance your observation ability. So simple things. And see, usually you get a group of people, ask them to go and get something beautiful. I can tell you 95% will come back with flower. It's already in the head. Beauty means flower. Nobody will go out and find something like this and bring, or like this, a wooden piece, no? But the moment you go through an activity like this, that when you truly begin to observe things, that is when you realize that everything is beautiful. Just that we don't see. So, just showing you a few things that enhance observation. So, I also began to take this to regular schools. Now, with all this NEP and all that coming, I felt that if you can actually focus this whole thing on observation, not art based education, this again, they're getting it wrong. Were they again fragmenting art, something different from knowledge? No. You see, actually, if you observe your senses, when you're experiencing anything, you are simultaneously experiencing the quantitative and the qualitative aspect. They are not two different things. When you say you're eating, you're having some food, there's more salt. Aren't you engaging with both? You're also feeling it, tasting it. You're also immediately realizing something is more. So the quantification is happening at the same time. You're also engaging with quality. That is the way we engage with, not art in the evening and morning. You have no. That's the absolutely wrong idea of what is to be whole. The whole is the being that is whole, not your subjects. If the being is whole, the being then engages with the wholeness. If you fragment the being, through, of course, through this external means. So this reimagination is extremely important. So let me now take you to a little bit of written matter. So basically, I'm not a writer. In fact, I don't read at all. In 91, I stopped reading completely. And actually, it is only because I stopped reading completely, I began to see the world. As I started living with rural tribal people, I understood one thing very clearly, which is literates learn the word, illiterates learn the world. You see the difference? All reductionism, everything that we tell that poor Descartes has done, no, it's the text that has done it. It is not Descartes who is responsible for reduction. Because how many of you read Descartes? Have you read? Hardly anybody. So the philosophers think that it is because of Descartes that reduction is happening. No, it's because we have exchanged the world with the word. And we have assumed that this information is knowledge. Actually, we are in a cognitive delusion. And so as I began to work with rural tribal people, I began to understand that two things I began to research on. One, what is the biological roots of being? And that, again, not through reading, but being, by being. Stop reading, observing, looking at people who are doing things. So it's a constant observation. Not like the experiential learning slots that is put in the schools, One half an hour experiential learning. No, isn't that absurd actually? Calling some, so which also means that there is something called non-experiential learning, no? Am I right? I mean, it's a strange idea, but I don't think even you claim about critical thinking, but I hardly see anybody doing that. That term is there. There are departments now training critical thinking, but a simple thing like this, something called experiential knowledge. Anyway, so I began to study. The other thing I began to study is the damages that literacy does to your cognitive system. I know this may sound a little, strong, but it's after years of work, not reading, but looking at what is knowledge, how knowledge is created, how as biological beings we are meant to create knowledge. That is our biological beingness. that every living being is living in knowledge. It's not an effort. That how did you imbibe your mother tongue? Was there any teaching? Was there any learning? In Bangalore slums, children learn 4 to 5 languages with no effort. And then you look at the struggle that we go through when that second language, English, was given. I mean, not the people who already have English in their home. I'm talking about others. So somewhere we have completely failed to look at what is this being, what is the biological aspect of cognition. So let me take you through a interesting experience. Just take a look at this picture. I'll just take you through some interesting experience. Take a look at this. All right, everybody's seeing that? Okay. This. All right. Okay. So where did your eye go when I showed you these two pictures? The written word, right? I just wanted to prove that. But that is so easy. To look at the written word is the easiest thing. That is how it kills your actual senses. Reading, don't confuse reading with your sensory ability to observe. These are two different things. Right? So, again, two, 3 more experiences. Let me take you through. Right? You see, this is seeing. Now you see. See? These are two types of experiences. One is learning the world, one is observing the world. You don't make a story in the head. You can see these are entirely two types of processes. When you read something that is absent, you have to make a story in the head. Right? When you see the specs, you don't have to make a story in the head. You have seen it. So this is learning the word. Now, let me again take you through one or two more. Tell me, what is the color of sky? Do you remember? Fast. Color of sky? Don't defend. You can just, what comes to your mind? Say. What is the color of leaf? Green. Yeah. This is the regular answer that you get in any educated group. And once this was asked to children, the child asked back, what time of the day are you referring to? Simple, no? Because they are present, we are absent. We have ready-made answers in the head, no doubt about any damn thing. Either you don't have it to look in the dictionary. There it is. Other simple activity you can go through. Imagine traveling to Delhi, right? Travel to Delhi, come back to Bangalore, right? So for most educated, going to Delhi means going up, correct? Did you do a vertical travel? So what I'm trying to say is that without our knowledge, there is a cognitive realm that has been shaped by what we engage with. Now this is something that no research has been done at all. Neither on how children learn and how beauty is integral to knowing, there is no research at all. One more simple activity. Take a look at this color and you name the color, okay? Just keep naming the color. Wow. Right? Okay. Now you. All right, all right, all right. Okay. Okay, now continue this again. All right? Name the color. Name the color. Name the color. All right? No, don't worry. No, the point is simply this, that I say this, that this is what is called as cognitive dissonance. Not what the West have told you. That is not cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance means the body learns one thing and the mind learns one thing. That is cognitive dissonance. Did you experience it just now? Right now, I made you experience how the body is responding to something and the mind is responding to something. Because the mind dominates your sensory apparatus, you begin to engage with the text. You couldn't name the color, you read. So So I felt that I should write recently. I felt that. So initially, I normally do presentations like this because if you write, then the literate mind will make their own story depending upon what books they've read. You know, so there is no experiential basis for imagining. It's about books, which books you have read. That will create more and more stories in the head. So that is why I actually all my workshops it's actually experiential like this. You see, you know, because see, you must understand that the natural cognition is not argumentative. Argumentative method is because of literacy. If I, just showing you this, nothing to argue, no? Suppose on the way you saw a rope and you mistook it for a snake, right? Can we argue and solve the problem? Go and see once again, na? There's no other way. Natural cognition, that cognition that is given to us, can only be clarified by observation. Observation is the key to learning, which is something that has been completely taken away from our schooling system. And observation is the key to beauty, and nothing else. You read as many books of what is that? Any philosopher who has written on beauty, you will not get it. Kalidasa, you read, or anybody you read, no, you won't get it. Because that is something that you can only experience and sense it and feel it.
Thank you, Jinan. That was wonderful. Now, there's a word that is quite prominent in the book, but you didn't use it in your talk. And that word is wonder. That this mode of learning depends on maintaining a relationship of wonder with the world, right? Now, wonder comes naturally to children. And there's some neuroscience backing that because a child's brain actually has more synaptic connections than an adult brain. The prefrontal cortex, which is the rational executive part of the brain, matures slower than the rest of the brain. And also, children have the security of caregivers, so they have the freedom to explore. But when you start moving into adolescence and early adulthood, the prefrontal cortex kicks in. They're spending time outside the horizon of caregivers. They're wanting to define their own personality, so they start latching onto security blankets, external security blankets. How would you propose that an adult retain the capacity to wonder that they had more naturally as children?
Actually, it's on. Yeah, yeah. No, actually, when I started living with rural tribal people, I realized that most things that we deal in the urban scenario is absent. Actually, this thing doesn't happen with a rural tribal person primarily because you see, I talk about this as the paradigm of unknown and paradigm of known. We modern people belong to the paradigm of the known because we deal with ready-made knowledge all the time. Whereas people in rural tribal areas, they don't deal with ready-made knowledge, no information. To them, experience is only what makes something knowledge. Otherwise, it's information. So there is a constant engagement with the uncertainty and unknown in the rural scenario. So I think the shift is actually only in the urban, so-called educated people who move into the realm of known and then get trapped in reasoning. So reasoning is part of that. Reasoning is, according to me, reasoning is not a cognitive ability. You don't need reasoning. See, how did we reason at all to learn the mother tongue? Not once. We are speaking very well. Did we use reason? Reason is inherent to you. You don't have to consciously use reason. Reason became a conscious activity only in the modernity because they began to deal with what is known. To engage with what is known, you have no use of senses nor of intuition. So I think, these are the things that the West has not studied at all. You know? So if you 18th century is called as age of reason. Why 18th century age of reason? Because in 15th century, the printing press was established. In 300 years, everybody became readers. So all their discussion was based on what they read. Naturally, reason became to dominate the cultural scene. That is why 18th century is the age of reason. So age of reason is actually to me, is actually detrimental to human cognition. This is what I feel. Reason has a role, maybe to plan our meeting like this, we can have, but not on knowledge. Knowledge acquisition.
No, my question was really how do you retain wonder when you grow into adulthood? Because we tend to lose it. And perhaps I can tie that to your experience teaching design students because
Yeah,
they're early adults
yeah,
and they're already captured by this move away from wonder.
yeah.
So how do you convince them to come back into this relationship of wonder with the world?
Yeah. So, of course, yeah, I have been doing some experiments on. The problem is always is that, as I told you, knowledge precedes knowing. That is the basis of modernity. It's an ontological reversal. Knowledge precedes knowing. So when I work with design students, what I do is that I take them through a process of knowledge creation. So we start with the unknown. Just observe. No theories. Start observing. So, of course, this is not easy in the modern context because there's nobody interested in this, no? So it's very difficult to have, this only my, this, 3-week, 4-week program in this process, and then you go back to, knowledge and then analysis and all that, no? But anyway, I have been able to develop a system in which you get students to start exploring, and in the process they begin to see certain patterns emerging, and that knowledge creation process, if that is the end thing, then it changes from constant observation, naturally wonder. Because see, when do you observe? When you don't know, na? Otherwise, why do you have to observe? Observation basically means that you're engaging with the unknown. You're constantly in that process, in that state, no? So that will bring in both humility and wonder. So value is humility and wonder is the basis for natural cognition.
You mentioned that rural children are not as captured by biases as urban children are.
Yeah.
And yes, I understand urban children might be distracted by seductive imagery of advertising, television, things like that.
Yeah.
But aren't there biases in the rural area also? Because the rural areas are captured by certain orthodoxies of tradition, caste, gender,
Yeah.
etc. So,
Yeah.
so don't you have a different set of challenges in the
Definitely. But what I did was that I was living with the potters community. And my interest was that how are they learning pottery? There's no teaching happening. Yet by the time they reach 12 years, I find that they're able to do pottery very well. So I began to observe and document what is happening. Observation right from the time this woman is pregnant, there's child inside, and the woman is beating, making a pottery. So the learning is taking place right from the womb. The child is hearing that, and every day they are living in this environment of pottery being done, and I never see any teaching happening because learning is the nature of life. So you don't have to have any doubt about it whether they will learn. Like, did anybody have a doubt about mother tongue? No, you pick it up. But that is the nature of our system. So my interest was, of course, these sociological factors are there. I'm not denying that. And language plays a major role. And of course, everybody else plays a major role in your formation. But my interest was also to look at all the spontaneous activities that children were doing. And I began to document. I have a huge collection of documented things that children do. And so from that, I was able to see a clear grammar that has emerged from that. That what's the world after all? The world is form, what you see, process, materials. See, why do children, when they sit on a sofa, bounce? All children bounce on a sofa? Why is that not a subject of our study? This is my question. In fact, what we do is sit properly. I tell you, this is the material exploration. They are supposed to learn the world, not what you say. And life is enabling to do that, and we stop it. Simple thing, na? The moment they come to a place like this, they see squares, and they make use of it, and they make a game out of it. Am I right? Everywhere children are intelligent, life's intelligence is working at them, not their egoistic intelligence, which we impose. No, I'm talking about life's intelligence is at work. We're not letting that happen. And that you observe a child, you will see it. Any child. Right from the time, they are being fed, when they feel, they will start spitting out. What do the mothers do? They put everything back and put it again, one again. Simple, no? You don't let the intelligence function at all.
Isn't another one of the dangers that of habit? I mean, habit is actually something anesthetizing. Like if I'm driving on a regular, like work to home or journey I keep doing every day,
Yeah.
I go on autopilot. I can arrive at my destination with
Yeah.
no memory of the journey.
Absolutely.
So habit is something dangerous, even to people who are not captured by reading or intellectualism or something like that.
Yeah.
So how do you break that prison of habit?
Yeah. No, so I have seen this. For example, again, we take the potters. I find that every time, because they are not trapped by the mold, they have to pay attention each time. And I've seen this 70, 60, 70-year-old potter, when he makes a chula, no? Every time he treats it as if he's doing for the first time. So in the traditional setup, this is what I believe, that in the traditional setup, the whole design of life is to make you present, that you are present to the world. So when a potter is making the same pot for the 10,000th time, he still has to pay attention. You cannot do any artisanal work without paying attention. But of course, their body has a way of knowing. I also remember this architect friend was telling that he went to a potter's place and he wanted a particular piece. It was already dark. So then he explains, this is a size I want, this is a shape I want. And he goes inside, it is dark. He takes the clay, he works, he brings it, and is this what you want? He has not seen it. So this is still not habit. There is an attention that is already the body knows the shape, size, and all that. No, so habit. I think this habit formation is the problem of modernity. That the moment you bring in machines to do your work, repeated actions. So mold, for example, is an anti body, because when you work on the mold, you don't have to pay attention. But in tradition, there was no mold. Now, of course, as we go there, we are introducing molds because we are all worried about economic development. That becomes the main thing now. So everything else is swept aside. So
Okay, I have a bone to pick with you. You talked about the danger of reading, being trapped by the word as versus the world, and I'm a compulsive reader. If I don't read for a few days, I feel ill. I realize some of the dangers of that, and because it's something I went through myself, where there was a stage in my life where I sought to intellectualize everything.
Yeah.
And I realized the problem was like getting disembodied, losing roots in my body. So the way I read right now, to me, it is getting out of my body into someone else's body, someone else's space, so that when I come back to my own body, I come with fresh eyes and I see my body again. It's a way of breaking the habit. So if I propose that model of reading, do you?
Definitely. I also talk about how to read. See, the problem is actually not reading. The problem is what I call as what is understanding. That is actually the crux of the modern problem, is not knowing what is understanding and how does understanding take place. Modernity, we force understanding through reasoning. So just before we were rehearsing on the presentation, there's a beautiful poetry by Rilke, who talks about hold the questions, let answer arrive. See? Because if the answer is given to you now, you will not be able to understand it. So have the patience, hold it. maybe one day the answer will come to you. So, you see, this is also, I have also heard this from the Sanskrit sloka chanting people, the older generation. Now, of course, everybody is explaining everything away, but it's a myth actually, explaining everything away. So, it was said that the sloka is given to you and never explained to you, because understanding will take place when the experience happens. That is true understanding. Otherwise, we'll create a myth, an illusion that we have understood, and we stop exploring. So there were people actually understood the dangers of reading very clearly. You know, this cognitive science study has not been done at all on the impact of literacy on cognitive rewiring. It occupies your observation, sensory system observation, your eyes. It replaces that with thought, with mind.
The thing you cited of Rilke, it's actually from his book Letters to a Young Poet, where he's advising, and he's quite young himself. This is happening when he's in his late 20s. And there's another part in the book where obviously the poet, the young poet, he's corresponding with him, has asked him, "How do I write?"
Ah.
And Rilke responds, "You're asking the wrong question. The question you must ask is, must I write?" And if you spontaneously say, "I must," the how will resolve itself.
Absolutely.
So, is that how education has got diverted? It's not getting into the intuitive must I. What is my embodied impulse? It's getting into the external how to.
Absolutely. Because, I remember reading Kafka, and I felt the same thing. He had no choice but to write. There were few writers like that who had no choice but to write. Not like going into some institution, learning to write and producing the silly books. No. See, there has to be something deep that is urging to come out. And then you become a conduit, actually. You are not the creator, actually. You become the medium through which things happen. This is what I feel. Kafka's very clear to me. That's what I feel.
So basically, the problem you are identifying is disembodiment, the fact that we take our body out of it. Now, every mainstream religious tradition has a side tradition that is not always viewed with great ease by the orthodoxy of the tradition. And that's popularly known by the word mysticism. And mysticism claims that there are things that you always know more than is your capacity to say. And you can only know it with your body. What your body can grasp something that is beyond concept or description. And that is a sacred dimension. So is that what you're saying, that actually education has sanitized this quality of sacredness out of our life?
Absolutely. I always feel that people like Newton, Einstein, they were rishi munis. They were not scientists. Anybody who is into an inquiry, absolute devotion, they are actually religious. Whether they call them what is it, atheist? No, the act of devotion is a religious act. That's what I feel. So I think what has happened is that complete destruction of modern, humans whose authenticity is completely wiped out, because they have not been, they have been taken away from that authenticity. We are born with this. We are born with originality and authenticity. That is our beingness, which gets replaced immediately the moment you are born into this modern space with all kinds of gadgets, taking away, parents worried. So I think that, this is what I feel, that in the indigenous societies, illiterate societies are leading a unconscious spiritual life. They're unconscious about it. And which is what I feel, that every living being, every tree, every living being is spiritual. But, that's what it is. That's what I feel.
Actually, I read somewhere that a lot of the greatest physicists, Newton, Einstein, Eddington, Schrodinger, Niels Bohr, were all transcendentalists in their beliefs. So the problem is we've tried to say secular and sacred.
Yeah.
So that's actually created a problem in education, because education says just bring your head in and leave your heart at the door.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, you've written in the book, and I'll just read out a quote. Teaching in the conventional sense is not needed. What is needed is an environment where trust, freedom, care, and silence, where the natural tendencies in a child can unfold without interference. Elsewhere, you have said that education should involve all the senses, rather
Yeah.
than privileging the abstract, the literate, the visually seductive. So, could you expand on the pedagogy, the modes of teaching that actually build
Yeah.
on? Because
Yeah.
teachers go into a classroom with this compulsion to speak
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
So, you're saying here that you have to deploy silence, you have to deploy senses such as smell and touch.
Yeah.
And if you tell that to a traditional teacher, they would probably say, then how do I teach?
Yeah.
How do you respond to that
Yeah.
question?
No, actually, no. One fundamental principle of cognitive science is that what you experience, you imbibe that. This is something that the cognitive scientists themselves are not able to understand. A child, a teacher teaches the child to teach. Are you getting my point? When the child is experiencing being taught, the child learns to teach. It's a simple equation. If the child experiences a learner in front, the child continues the learning process. Because the learner is natural. So, in an environment where people are exploring, so the teacher doesn't have to do this act of teaching. The teacher is actually should be a learner who has some authentic things to learn. Then that child will be brilliant. The teacher has nothing to learn. No? This is the problem. No, I'm not deriding, but this is the way we have created a system of absolute boredom with everybody. No? So, what is important is that a learning environment enables learning. A teaching environment kills learning. It's a very simple thing. So, you have people who are, and you don't have to do acting of learning. No, then the child will pick that. They will become an actor of learning. You see, no, because this cognition, this rule of cognition is not something that you see. Monkey see, monkey do. The same with us also. I remember once. I'll tell you one simple incident. Uh, the child was reading a book, keeping the book upside down. Okay, this way. Right? Understand? I realized that is because that is the way mothers sit and teach the child. Na? Am I right? You put the book this way so that the child can see what is being. But the child thinks that is where to put the book. So he also kept the book like this. And now he is reading. And I have several such examples where what the mother does, the child picks up. So this is a simple rule of cognition, that what you experience, you imbibe that. That is what learning is actually.
Have you heard about something called the hole in the wall experiment?
Yeah. Yes, I have heard that.
Okay.
I've heard it, yeah.
This is this guy who puts in a slum in Delhi, he puts a computer inside a hole in the wall and just leaves it there. And or the computer can only take in English input. None of the children have exposure to computers, but it's just this thing, and he encourages them to play with it. And they teach themselves how to use a computer with no instruction, etc. Now, in one other talk, I heard this guy, Shugata Mitra, give, he's asked college student to help him with coaching some girls who have just been given a computer with material on genetics in it, and they have to learn. And that college student is someone who plays football with these girls. So she says, I have no expertise in this. So how can I guide them? So he says, no, you just use the grandmother technique. So she says, what's that? So he says, stand behind them. And whenever they do something, you say, wow, that's wonderful. Do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is nice. And we've all benefited from our grandmothers perhaps doing things like that to us. But critique also has its value, right?
Yeah.
And so And the problem with the education system is that the only form of critique is standardized testing.
Yeah.
And that pushes everyone towards uniformity, whereas what you're talking about is individualization. So what is the form of critique, of assessment, of feedback that builds on this individualization, on observation, on spontaneous creativity, and keeps uniformity, the push to uniformity, out of the door?
Hmm. Actually, see, this whole structure of modernity doesn't allow anything outside its rules and regulations, So, but why do you have to critique at all? Again, go back to mother tongue. Did anybody keep telling, wow, 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 did you said ma today? Of course, modern parents are doing that, of course. But traditionally, nobody ever did any encouragement for the child to learn or to walk. Did you do that? Actually, you don't need encouragement at all. The life in you is already functioning in a most apt manner, provided the situation is there,
But the example of the mother tongue
Yeah.
you give, people quite often get used to a habitual use of mother tongue. They stay within the standardized phrasing. They don't become poetic in that language necessarily. And sometimes that needs that little nudge and shake. So I'm talking about critique in that sense, to just break you out of habit. And so what guidance would you give to a teacher to build that feedback mechanism in teaching?
No, see, basically, actually, so whatever I'm talking about is from my own reflection of what I went through. So I began to look at what I call as implicit knowledge as something that everybody creates. That you have implicit knowledge of physics, mathematics, chemistry, everything implicitly. For example, you all learn to speak without knowing grammar. Am I right? Nobody knew grammar explicitly, but all of you spoke very well, which means that implicitly you knew grammar. So the question of education should be, how do you make what is implicitly known explicit? It's very simple. Otherwise, for example, I hope you remember your grammar classes. It was one of the most boring subjects. Third standard, fourth standard, when they put you through this grammar education. I wonder why it should be like that, because we already knew grammar implicitly. So I think the process should be that, of course, we have to discard whatever is happening today. I think it's completely irrelevant. This is what I feel. You don't have to agree with me at all. I feel today's educational process is completely 100% wrong, completely taken out. And then talk about what is learning. See, for example, I think the first and foremost thing we must acknowledge is that we are all meant to create knowledge. First acknowledgement. How do you then enable a situation that doesn't destroy this? If nature of learning is the nature of life, then why are we not thinking about a process that doesn't destroy it? Number one. Then, if you are more interested in going further, how do we then make what is this? And I think that till about 12 years, we shouldn't interfere at all with children, because your intuitive framework, your whole processing system is very different. Where is your intuition today? It has been killed completely. Where is your observation today? So all the natural abilities have been killed, placed, just replace it with reasoning. So to my mind, if you make me the chief prime minister, this is what I will do. I will completely remove all the schools in the manner it is run and enable environments where people are learning together. No teacher. I will remove the teacher heading from everybody, professor, teacher, everything. Become a learner. You can be master learner. So there is also degree there, because there are master craftsmen, no? Fantastic, who are more involved, more, So create an environment of, because in tradition, that is how everybody learn. No? How did a fantastic Ayurvedic physician come out? Because from the womb, the child is listening, hearing everything. Till about 12, 13 years, the child is in the environment of a physician practicing, making. So there's already a foundation of knowledge built. Then 13, 14 years, they are able to. So I think that we must actually study how does a true genius arise. And how do you create such environments?
Can we do away with teachers? But let me approach it from a different angle. The philosopher Michael Polanyi, who was actually a scientist till he was in his 50s before he became a philosopher, and he popularized the phrase tacit knowledge, that we always know more than we can say, and there's knowledge that we hold in our bodies. And education as privileged explicit knowledge, that what you can't say is treated as having less value. And he argues that the more tacit knowledge is, the more transcendental it is.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he says about teachers is teachers tend to believe that their first task is to step into the classroom and display expertise. And that again starts sidelining tacit knowledge. He says the first task of the teacher is to earn trust before you display expertise.
Yeah.
So actually, the job of the teacher is to build that environment of trust and safety, so that then students can explore. So, if you, as you said, if I was the prime minister, I would do this. So, how would you go about training teachers to shift to this? How would you convince teachers? What are the techniques for building trust?
No, I would actually completely reimagine this whole system. I think there is something called primary knowledge of life that is required, the foundational knowledge. And I would say body, health, food, farming. Those are, we have this first aid box, no? Similarly, there has to be a first aid knowledge. All of us should know how to cook. All of us should know how to cook. And the right food, not pastry and all that nonsense. What is right for the body, not for the mind? Please understand there's a difference between, because modernity understands what is the food right for the mind, not for the body, because the body's intelligence has been completely killed. So, what are the things that are primarily required for a living being? So I would actually redefine this whole paradigm of what is that we should be learning first of all as a foundational knowledge. You know, and I think then teachers should become farmers more than teachers. Instead of pen, they should go and dig. Or something like that, because I think that is far more meaningful for life. So I would reimagine this whole system completely. And the first thing I will do is to stop selling water. That will be my first ethical framework, that I'll stop selling water. I think something completely unethical is happening in the world today. Completely unethical. This is the way I look at it. You don't have to agree with me at all. So I would reimagine this whole thing. And you see, I think all this is happening because that, to my understanding, our beingness is situated in three fundamental aspects. One is the value, ethics. Second is knowledge. And third is beauty. These are the three pillars of life. And integral. These are not one after the other, but they are integral to the being. The ethics becomes the context of life, how to live. A desert will tell you how to live, no? How to use water? Who is telling you? It's a context that first dictates how to live, which means that is what ethics is all about. What, again, is dictated by the context. Desert will tell you this is what you should eat. Because in the desert, if you eat this, this is what the environment demands, not that what is that? Or balanced diet that the West talks about. No, it's not a balanced diet. The desert will dictate what you should eat if you're sensitive. And then how to do these things. That again is the element that eliminates unwanted wastage of energy.
Okay, I think we should open it up, and I'll do that after offering a couple of quotations, which I think capture the essence of what you are saying.
Yeah.
Even though I learned these lines from reading. One is the scholar of myth, Joseph Campbell, who said that we make a mistake in thinking we seek the meaning of life. What we truly seek is the rapture of being alive. And the other is by the German philosopher Gernot Bohm, who's written this essay on beauty. And it really struck me because in architecture school, first, strangely, beauty was hardly mentioned. And when it was mentioned, it was always in a theory of beauty, some theory of proportion, like the golden section um, or color theory or something like that. But beauty as experiential was never talked
Absolutely.
about. And Gernot Bohm ends his essay on beauty with a line saying that beauty is that which mediates to us the joy of being here.
Thank you. That was very interesting. And I came, how shall I say, I'm an urban person, and I came to a lot of those conclusions through Ayurveda. So, not having had any experience of Ayurveda, in my 40s, my mother, because I had I had an illness which was chronic. And my mother said, and just surgery after surgery, and she said, why don't you try Ayurveda? So I went to this physician, and he had it under control in 6 months. So my gynecologist called all her juniors in and said, look at this miracle. Because we've been treating her for decades, and he's had it under control in 6 months. So that sort of shifted my approach. Now, a lot of the things you're saying, and yes, you're right, he came from a Vaidyan's family. But then it becomes, like Prem said, can you be a Vaidyan only if you're from a Vaidyan family? Because only then will you learn like that. You get what I'm saying? I can never be a Vaidyan. I experienced it and I know the good it did me. Yeah? But then, like I went for this lovely concert 2 days ago, and they're 7th generation musicians. So can you only be a musician if you come
No,
from a family of musicians?
Not really. I think it's about devotion.
I beg your pardon?
Devotion. Devotion. So whatever I'm talking about doesn't have a precedence. I devoted myself to inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
I devoted.
Mm.
That's why I'm able to speak this. So it's all about devotion. So when you went through a crisis, you realized now I have to take a journey into it. I
Yeah.
have to understand body. Did you devote yourself to understanding body? Because I think in the modern
And that we
context,
eat for nutrition. You
No.
get what I'm saying? And now increasingly it's how it's presented and how it tastes. So we're aestheticizing something without forgetting that the primary reason why we're eating is
Yeah.
for nutrition.
Yeah.
And if we don't eat what suits our body,
Yeah.
the body falls ill. It's as simple
Definitely.
as
So,
that.
no, precisely
see?
the point I'm trying to make is this, that we are now trapped in the idea of the beauty. It's a mental idea. Body's idea of beauty is what I'm talking about. It is not mind's idea of beauty. Body's idea of beauty is that, you see, another small incident. We were one day eating with my child and 4 of us. Karela was there, bitter gourd. So I was telling my lecturer mind was there, eat it very good, iron and all that. She told no. Another 16-year-old, she also told no. And a 35-year-old wife, she was eating, enjoying Karela. So I asked her, when did you eat? When did you start liking? Were you always like this? She don't know. 17, 18 years when she suddenly felt like eating. So how many of us actually trust what we feel like? Because feeling is what the body's message. This is what you should do. But what we are engaging with modernity, no, I'm telling, anyway.
Just to expand a bit on a question that do you need to be a part of that tradition?
Yeah.
The word guru actually means dispeller of darkness, and the true guru lifts the veil of ignorance from the student, so the student recognizes the light that was always shining within.
Yeah.
And in that model, the guru's role is not to teach in the conventional sense of the word, but to be the light at the end of the tunnel, to be that embodiment of mastery,
Yeah.
so that the student uses that as a way of questioning his or her own practice.
Yeah.
So don't you need that aspect also, that so that you don't become this creature of habit, so that personal exploration doesn't become narcissistic and
No. You see, the thing is that to me, the way I look at guru is that I have several gurus, not one. An incident is my guru. My first incident was that I was expelled from the college. That was when I look back, that was the biggest gift that life gave me. So I place that as a guru. Every incident or every person that I met who started leading me. So to me, there are several gurus. I also believe that if I begin to believe that I am a guru, then I am mistaken. It is the shishya who chooses the guru. A guru doesn't have a right to even choose his shishya. This is what I believe in. So, and also just want to tell you, see, in the Upanishadic stories, there is not one incident you will find a guru teaching a shishya. Never. It's always the guru telling, go there, find out, and come and tell me. It is the shishyas. So, that much, if you are stuck, the guru will tell, go there, find out, and come back. Guru himself may not have, herself may not have anything to offer. Because, see, all these has to be experienced from within, not from outside. So, that clarification will always come from inside you, not because a guru told, no, this is right, so you.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for the wonderful talk. I had this question around this paradox that groups of humans seem to make versus individuals, right? So, when you look at more organized, more advanced societies, there's obviously a lot more order and security for people, but also comes at a cost of them being a lot more robotic and
Not more?
a lot more robotic in their day-to-day. For example, if you take a society like Japan, which is ostensibly perfect and disciplined and all of that, people who are living day-to-day lives there are living very monotonous, very droning kind of lives. Whereas if you go to a rural place in India, like you wonderfully showed us, there's a lot of life in individuals, but society as a whole seems to be backward. And as a general rule, when you look at migrations and what people opt to do, you find people going from Bihar to Japan, but never from Japan to Bihar, right? You have the odd person who might come for the mysticism and stuff like Sir said, but in most cases, it is the flow happening the other way. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, actually, you see, the thing is that people are so easily conditionable, especially the educated, easily conditionable, that the power can make you do whatever they wish. So this fragility of the process of our brain, that it can be destroyed like anything, is not something that has not been, or probably it has been understood and they are usually using it purposely, or have not been understood. That wisdom is what is required to actually engage with these things, and not intelligence and smartness, which is what is getting more prominence today. So what is really required to be with the child is subtlety. And so I believe that today the at least this is what I believe, that we are going on a completely destruction path, and that's where we are heading to. And maybe one day we'll come back. Many of us will go back to Japan, to Bihar, maybe. I don't know. I have no idea, because see, from the way I look at what is happening today is that even though we call it progress, I find that there is no progress here. The food that we eat is poisonous. Am I right? The water we drink is poisonous. The air that we breathe is poisonous. Then what progress are we talking about? So I don't know why people don't understand the simple things, that any new material that is introduced. Today I was just seeing something called this, for washing, that thing is used, no? That green color and yellow sponge-like thing. That is full of poison. And this is true with almost everything that we are engaging with modernity. That the pain that everybody is using is supposed to be poisonous. So see, modernity, the default setting is lying, cheating. There's no place for truth. But we are meant to trust. This is a problem of human being, that we are born in truth. our beingness isn't born in truth. We are in truth. And we trust. We are meant to trust. But modernity has created a situation of complete distrust. But we trust it. I remember when I tell that, don't take these medicines, they are poisonous. I don't think anybody will trust from a rural area because they are trusting like anything. This trust is what has been completely misused by modern intelligent minds. What is required is not intelligence, but sensitivity. Which, I mean, of course, we have this fine, and maybe after all this teaching, we will say, no, value education, where has it gone? You see, include value education at a late thing. So I don't have any, I believe that it's a long journey of rediscovering what is to be human.
Hi, Jinan. I don't know whether you recall 35 years back when I spoke to you, we were in Delhi. You gave this idea and I laughed. That was my first reaction. But within 5 minutes, I was in rapt attention and I was sold out to your idea. Now, after such a long time, I'm just curious. You had started schools where the children were put through this system, what your idea is. To me, that time it sounded very utopian. Because you need to change the entire ecosystem for that to be successful. So my query is just out of curiosity. Those children who came under your wings, how are they doing in their real life today?
No. Those things, when we work with 1 or 2 years in a small pockets, nothing will happen. The benefit was for us because in 3 years, we were able to document a whole lot of things. We were able to understand very clearly what is cognition, how children learn, how do they create knowledge. That is what our success is. And we also found that if you look at the most experimental schools in the world, they are talking about it now. For example, today, the most interesting school is in China. Won't believe this. There is a whole system called Anji Play. ANJY Play. ANJI, I think. Play. But the difference is that they are using fake tiles, bricks. We were using the real ones. That's the difference. And when you give children fake, you are completely misleading them. But when a child is actually using a real brick, the child understands force, fulcrum, lever, all that, no? But where does the child understand when he is looking at a rubber brick and making these things? So you understand, now? So it is for us because I think it's a long journey to. So I always say that this is a 1,000-year project, 1,000-year, because today the way the world is going, there is no chance of even recognizing that we are. You see, I'll tell you one very interesting thing. Today, if you look at the cognitive science, modern cognitive science is a result of wanting to create intelligent machines, not because they felt there is anything wrong with education. Number one. Secondly, now, about 20 years ago, probably, I don't know exact time, they realized that children are the most intelligent beings, and they started studying children in order to create intelligent machines. I have documentation of all this, so I'm not just telling that. So I very systematically study what is happening in the West. What is their study on children? Their study on. I have their research on literacy. Understand? Huh? So with children's thing, they are telling that we will create computers that learn like children. There's a statement by a cognitive scientist. Understand? Huh? Why is that not being recognized in a schooling paradigm and changing the schools? No?
If I can offer a response on that, I'm an architect, and my first job was for an architect who was also a teacher. And he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, I can't teach architecture because architecture is not teachable in that sense. But I can go into the college and communicate my passion for architecture. And if the student gets infected by that passion, that student will learn architecture. So now there are two aspects to that. One is if a person internalizes passion, they can cope with uncertainty, they can cope with a lot. The problem is you don't equip our students to be passionate about something. The second is he's talking about infection, infecting passion. He's talking about virality. We've all been through the COVID pandemic and we realize how quickly a virus can spread. Some people talk about the idea virus. So it's a different model. It's not based on rational sort of persuasion. It's based on the infection of passion.
Yes. Thank you for your beautiful thoughts. And I'm just compelled to think that we are where we are as adults, and we are living in this world. We cannot divorce ourselves entirely from the systemic setup that we are in. Now, after what you just explained to us, how would you help us reconcile this balance of the external and the internal learning? Because we are where we are. We can't just pluck ourselves out and move away. So what would you suggest as baby steps we do to get in touch with the inner learning and stay in the external world?
So actually, in my life, it's a child that began to change my life. Now, when the child came to my life, I decided three things. I will never say no to her. I will always follow her, and I will never lead her. She leads me. So, few things that we can do with our own lives. So, I also stopped reading. You don't have to do that. But I stopped reading. But even if you read, never get into an argumentative mind. The problem is that we are continuously arguing in the mind. We are not listening to anybody. You listen. You don't have to agree or disagree. But listen without agreeing and disagreeing. This is a discipline that very difficult to have. So I think these are internal work that one needs to start. When you recognize that there is a problem, then you start recognizing these things, and So by the way, I do something called we have a small team of parents who are systematically observing children, documenting. I believe that the world to come back to its normalcy, mothers must take charge. And they must take charge from the time the child is in the womb. Trust the womb, not the expert. This is what I say. Trust the womb. The womb is actually, the child is coming to you to heal you. I mean, these are, you may find that this may be very strong statements, but having had a lot of experience with mothers, and realizing that fundamentally modern man is always against life. So the mother has, pregnant and she's vomiting. Normally 90% will go and take some medicine and kill the vomiting. I believe that the child is telling that the food that you're eating is not right. Change the food. Simple. If the child is actually guiding you, your taste changes, am I right? So who is making that change? If the change of taste is done by the child, then your vomiting is also done by the child. The child is telling the food you're eating is not right. And I believe that stop trusting science. Trust life. Trust life. Trust inside. This is what is to be trusted. So have courage. Simple. And don't engage too much with scientists. Don't argue with anybody. I mean, there's no end to arguments. That's why. Trust life. Trust the child. The child can guide you into life. This is what I... So we have a group of parents who are systematically trying to document. We are actually initiating a completely fresh research. You see, what the problem with modernity is that modern humans have stopped learning. They are analyzing, thinking they are learning. That's not learning. Learning is a process of life where senses are involved. That is what cognition is all about. It's not reading and thinking. That's not cognition at all. Cognition is about the body. So, now they are talking about embodied cognition. Have you heard that? Absolute nonsense. It's a mind creating another story. Is it? So when they say embodied cognition, there is also something disembodied cognition. You see?
Thank you for your thoughts. There's so many ideas packed into this 1 hour that I probably have to watch the recording a couple of times to unpack and connect the dots. What I'm trying to connect in my head is the fact that we had a spoken oral tradition for a very long time, and
Yeah.
maybe that was a way of experiencing because of the rhythm and the cadence of the words and even sacred sound and things like that. So there must have been a deep understanding of how sounds were formed and what
Yeah.
each sound meant.
Yeah.
which has also been lost. And also, that's one thought that came to me. The other is that ours is a tradition where science and spirituality have always been on parallel tracks. We've never been in opposition to each other, and the greatest developments of science now are there in our scriptures. And if you look at the scriptures, they talk about things like quantum and beyond.
Absolutely.
So are we losing that knowledge also over time?
See, this language, this is another misconception that the West has been promoting, that knowledge is transferred through language. So oral traditions transferred through language is the misconception that is getting promoted. No. Knowledge is always recreated. It is experiential. It has nothing to do with language. That is the first thing we must, clearly understand, because many of the people in the indigenous knowledge systems, they're getting trapped by the Western articulation that knowledge is. So they talk about storytelling is a latest thing today, na? Absolute nonsense. That is the another catchword they have put in, storytelling. Everybody is a storyteller. No, the senses that gives you knowledge. So that is number one. Secondly, I'm also distinguishing between what is experiential language and what is mental language. In modernity, what we have is mental language, that is not experiential language. A simple example is that in the modern parlance, we talk about food in terms of vitamins, protein, have more fiber and all those kind of things. Na? That's a mental idea of. In tradition, experiential languages have more mango. Don't eat jackfruit. More clearer? That is experiential language. So today we have to have a mental idea of what that meant. There is no direct understanding that takes place. The mind has to then decode. So clearly there's a difference between languages. Other thing is that modernity, language is no longer oral. It is visual. And I'm sure it has changed things in a very fundamental manner. So I believe that there more research, honest research, not to manipulate life. So first paradigm of research is that it is not to manipulate life, it is not to control life, but to know. Nothing more than that. That should be the primary, that should be the basis for science. And then we need to restart this process in a deeper manner.
I have the mic. May I? So You say that life is sort of learning in itself and embodied cognition, but we've talked so much about children. I was wondering. I want to know what you think about that process happening as we become adults and as we age, and the kind of changes that happen in the body as well. And I'm asking this from a very personal perspective.
Yeah.
I'm in my 40s, and my body is changing as a woman, and
Yeah.
that has made so many other changes in my life, in my philosophy, in my value systems, even in my career. So I'm just also curious to know if, as we age, as our bodies change, how does that embodied cognition, how does that learning change as well?
Mm, See, I think the initial 12 years, this is exact age I won't tell, but around 12 years, puberty in the traditional sense, is the time when what I call as the cognitive foundation is formed. Because now we won't crawl, no? Crawling is a certain stage, no? So like that, there is a certain activities that happen till 12, and then it stabilizes, but it stabilizes with ability to intuit. It's a life's process that is happening. It's not an egoistic idea of knowledge that is, understand? Na? So the body biologically has, formed, shaped, and then it is engaging with the world. So as you grow older, this doesn't change much, except that you become more and more. If you're contemplative, you begin to understand far more. See, that is what I talk about as metacognition. Actually, cognition happens at one level. Metacognition is the time happens at a much later years, when you are begin to also not only experience but also see what you experience. Are you getting my point? So that I think at an older age, this deeper uh, uh, two levels of knowing can happen. One, as you are doing it, and then you become the knower of, you become the observer of what you are doing. I don't think I have answered your.
Let me offer something there, having been some 25 plus years ahead of the journey. But I think the mistake we often, when I look back at my younger days, I think the mistake we often make as young adults is feeling the weight of the future. And one mellows on that as you go further. So to be sort of more present centered and just sort of navigating your way through. And there's this lovely verse from a Bob Dylan song, My Back Pages, which I think captures this perfectly. And that, when you're younger, because you feel the weight of the future, your opinions are more strident. And he says, my guard stood hard when abstract threats too noble to neglect deceived me into thinking I had something to protect. Good and bad, I defined those terms quite clear, no doubt, somehow. But I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now.
Yeah.
You say that modern education methods and systems have basically spoiled the cognitive system, right? However, over the past many decades, and we have had a lot of inventions and discovery. I mean, basically inventions. Some of these scientific inventions have made us lazy, and we are paying the price for it. But there are also a lot of inventions, especially those related to health sciences, which has helped us a lot. Let's accept that. I mean, for example, COVID. I mean, during
COVID?
during
Not
COVID,
very
there have
sure.
been like vaccines, and of course it's of course debatable, but still we all went through it, and so if the modern education systems and are not good enough, how do we explain these inventions? For example, not forget COVID, even the light electric bulb or the Microsoft PowerPoint presentation which we are using, or this video device which we are using to record and later see, or or even the songs or whatever, all these scientific inventions. So if these are all, I mean, the scientists who invented them aren't they products of this education system, or how do we explain that? I mean, isn't that a contradiction? Or I mean, that's a doubt I have. I mean,
Yeah,
simple
yeah.
doubt I have. Thank you.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, in fact, I cited Michael Polanyi, who was a chemist, a scientist till his mid 50s, and then became a philosopher. And the one is, Jinan makes a point quite stridently in his book that we make a mistake if we think beauty belongs only to art, and we have to see the whole world as beautiful. And that's something that Polanyi says also, is that the scientists who are really creative are the ones who have this capacity to wonder about the world, to have this intense curiosity about the world. In fact, to approach science as a child. And to retain that embodied sense. So he says, as a chemist, what I was seeking to do was to take what was happening on the laboratory bench and bring that back into my body. So, and I think that's the point you make when you say beauty shouldn't be confined to art. So it's not that, I think we make a mistake if we split it into scientific and aesthetic. We need to just say we're human beings, that we have to take that holistic view that everything is a natural process of life.
Could be because see, look at all the people here. Have we invented anything? Let's talk about it.
Yes, there's a saying that is attributed to Mark Twain, but I'm not sure he said it. He says, I was educated and then it took me a lifetime to get over it.